There is a hunger that no meat can satisfy, a kind of gnawing, not in the stomach, but in the soul. Pudge is not just a butcher, he is an addict. He lumbers through the battlefield with a cleaver in hand, but it is not violence he craves. It is the ritual, the consumption, the next fix. Every hook is a relapse, every flesh heap a tally of indulgence. He is not fed by food, but by the scream of contact, the intimacy of damage. In this, he is no different from us. Addiction, in its truest form, is not merely a matter of substance. It is an architecture of yearning, a system built around the infinite loop of desire and regret. Carl Jung wrote that every form of addiction is a substitute for genuine spiritual longing, and in Pudge, that substitute becomes grotesquely literal. He is full, yet never fulfilled, surrounded by death, yet never at peace. His body is a map of consequences, sewn flesh, bulging veins, a belly too large to hold anything but metaphor. He is what happens when appetite forgets the taste of satisfaction. In Arabic poetry, hunger is often used as a metaphor for longing, for love, for truth, for God. But Pudge's hunger is broken. He does not hunger towards something. He simply hungers. Each hook is an act of prayer to a false god. Each pull, a communion with the abyss. His cleaver, his chain, his rot. It is all a choreography of need. The moment the hook lands, there is ecstasy, the release, the moment of connection, and then it passes. He must hook again, and again, and again. This is the language of addiction, the myth of just one more drink, one more scroll, one more game, one more hook. The irony is that Pudge is often seen as comic relief. He laughs, he mocks, he dances in the blood of others, and yet, those who know addiction know this mask well, the clown that hides the craving, the smile that delays the scream. Pudge is not funny, he is a tragedy wearing a butcher's apron. But look closer, underneath the horror lies something human, a man who was once a scavenger of corpses, turned prisoner of his own appetite. He is caught in a feedback loop of desire and disgust, pleasure and punishment. And in this loop, we find ourselves reflected because we live in a world of loops, of refresh buttons, of dopamine triggers, of rewards just out of reach. We are all Pudge in some way, fighting to feed a hole that does not close. What is it about his design, his playstyle, his voice, that makes him so beloved? Why do so many players find comfort in him? These are the questions we'll ask, not just about Pudge, but about ourselves. This is not just a video about a hero. It is about addiction, about loops, about the masks we wear. This is a study of the hunger that never ends.
Before he was a monster, Pudge was a man with a job, a role, a purpose, grim as it was. He worked among the dead, not out of cruelty, but necessity, a flesh carver for the dead god. He moved among corpses like a custodian of rot, dispassionately cutting, preparing, processing. But something changed. The boundary between death and appetite began to blur. The butcher, who once served the dead, began to hunger for what he handled. Perhaps it started with a small taste, a bit of gristle, a scrap unclaimed, and then spiraled into a need. This is how many addictions begin, not with the forbidden, but with the familiar, with proximity, with a slow erosion of resistance. Pudge did not fall into madness overnight. He was seduced. The grotesque became beautiful to him. The stench of decay transformed into perfume. What was once revulsion became ritual. In this descent, we see the anatomy of compulsion. The addict's path is not linear. It is a spiral, a looping staircase that always returns to the same floor, but each time the light is dimmer, the air more sour. Pudge's law doesn't offer redemption. There is no why that explains him away. Instead, it presents a raw truth. Sometimes the fall is the story. Jung would describe this as identification with the shadow, the process by which we fuse with the parts of ourselves we once tried to repress. Pudge embraced his darkness until it became him, no longer a man with a knife, but a hunger-given form. This is not a villain's origin. It is a mirror, a warning, a confession, and in games where we pick up his cleaver and click play, we take on more than just his powers. We take on his past. We become, for a moment, the addict wearing flesh.
There is something almost sacred in the way Pudge plays. To hook is not just to engage, it is to perform, to complete the loop. Cast, land, pull, rot, devour, again, again, again. It's a choreography of violence wrapped in reward. Each successful hook releases a surge of satisfaction, a tiny hit of digital dopamine. Missed hooks bring shame, frustration, a desire to redeem oneself, and so the player continues, chasing that high. This gameplay loop mirrors the neurochemistry of addiction: anticipation, action, reward, crash, repeat. Pudge's mechanics don't just represent addiction, they simulate it. His abilities train the brain to seek a rhythm of highs and lows, to obsess over timing, to crave the next perfect pull. The hook becomes a fetish object, imbued with more meaning than the match itself. Players remember legendary hooks the way addicts remember their best high. The longer the pull, the deeper the emotional imprint. The more unlikely the catch, the sweeter the taste. Even his failures feed the loop. The missed hook justifies another attempt. It's never enough, never final. Carl Jung wrote that rituals, when properly enacted, help bring order to the chaos of the unconscious. They are symbolic containers for instinct, transformation, and wholeness. But when ritual loses its symbolic meaning, when it becomes compulsive, it no longer heals, it enslaves. This is what we see in Pudge. His ritual has no sacred end, no symbolic resolution. It is repetition without reflection, instinct without integration. Instead of making the player whole, it fragments them into reaction and response. The game, too, becomes a co-conspirator, rewarding the compulsion and masking it as skill. Win or lose, the loop continues. The hook is not a tool, it is a tether, and the player is no longer the master of the performance. They are its offering. This is not gameplay. This is ritual gone wrong. The butcher does not aim. The butcher obeys. Pudge does not whisper. He bellows. He mocks. His voice is gluttony given sound. Every line he delivers is soaked in pleasure and perversion. Fresh meat, he cries, not as a warning, but as a celebration. And yet, beneath the bravado, there's a strange kind of intimacy in his voice. He talks not just to his enemies, but to himself. I'll be back with a new spleen for ya. A promise, or a threat, to his own body. His laughter is not joyous, it is manic. A release valve for a pressure that never drops. Slavoj Žižek once said that the true ideology is not in what we consciously believe, but in the spontaneous expressions that erupt when we are unguarded, in our jokes, our slips, our excesses. Pudge's voiced lines are this kind of eruption. They are not tactical, they are confessional. They expose the raw, compulsive mind of someone who cannot regulate desire. His words come out not as thoughts, but as symptoms. He is not articulating strategy, he is leaking pathology. In a game filled with stoic warriors and divine avatars, Pudge is uniquely human, messy, erratic, always narrating his own spiral. His voice is the soundtrack of someone trying to make sense of craving through comedy. Like the addict who makes light of their pain, he turns his compulsions into punchlines. But behind the humor is a darker truth. He cannot stop. In psychoanalytic terms, Pudge is the return of the repressed. His speech is not mediated by the superego, it flows directly from the id. In Freudian theory, the psyche is divided into three parts. The id, which is primal and impulsive, the superego, which is moral and judgmental, and the ego, which negotiates between them.
Most of us speak through the ego, balancing what we want with what we should do. But Pudge bypasses all that. There is no filter, no delay, no shame, just appetite, just release. Even his name Pudge is diminutive. It reduces the horror of his form to something almost cute, almost safe. This dissonance creates unease, the way a child's lullaby sounds terrifying when played in a minor key. His voice invites us in with laughter, then traps us in revulsion. And yet we listen, we mimic him, we spam his lines for fun. Because in some strange way, his chaos gives us permission to be unhinged too. He says the things we bury. He laughs at the things we fear. In voice, as in gameplay, Pudge is the grotesque stripped bare. Not a mask, but a megaphone. Flesh Heap is more than just a passive ability. It is a philosophy. It rewards killing. But more importantly, it rewards hoarding, the memory of the kill. Every stack is a scar worn as a medal. The addict doesn't just crave the high. They collect proof that they've chased it. The tally becomes part of the identity. In this way, Flesh Heap mirrors the compulsive need not just to consume, but to count. It is a mechanic of obsession disguised as progress. Each kill, each stack says, you did something, you mattered, you fed the hunger. But the number never feels high enough. Through the lens of psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, this is the symptom of what he calls the lack, the eternal sense that something is missing within us. Lacan argued that the self is never truly whole. Instead, it is built around a void we try to cover with symbolic substitutes. These substitutes, what he called the objet petit a, are stand-ins for a completeness we can never attain. For Pudge, each Flesh Heap stack functions like an objet petit a token that promises wholeness but never delivers. The satisfaction of the kill fades quickly, and the next one is needed to momentarily quiet the hunger. The ritual of stacking becomes an attempt to stitch together an identity, to build a self from fragments of flesh. But because the core emptiness is structural, not situational, no number of kills can resolve it, so he keeps stacking and stacking. Philosopher Jean Baudrillard might say that the stack becomes a simulation, a symbol that has lost connection to the reality it once represented. The kill no longer matters, only the number does. The Flesh Heap becomes not a memory, but a performance. We stack for the sake of stacking, much like how we chase likes, followers, or statistics. Not for meaning, but for the illusion of meaning. Finally, Michel Foucault reminds us that the body itself becomes the canvas of our obsessions. He argued that power inscribes itself on the body through repetition, through discipline, but also through desire. Pudge's body inflates with each kill, becomes heavier with each indulgence. His form is not just grotesque, it is historical. It tells the story of a compulsion enacted over time. Flesh Heap is the addict's journal, written not in ink, but in weight. And the player feels it too. They chase stacks not because they are necessary, but because they are there. It is the same impulse that keeps gamblers at the machine, even when they're winning. Just one more, just a little bigger, just a little more grotesque. This is not growth, it is inflation. And Pudge, bloated and breathless, is the consequence of a culture that confuses size with significance.
There's a strange comfort in playing Pudge. For many players, he feels like home, not because he is safe, but because he is honest. He doesn't pretend to be noble or heroic. He is pure impulse, stripped of pretense, and that is liberating. In a world where we are constantly performing, curating, polishing, pretending, Pudge lets us indulge the parts of ourselves we usually repress. The part that wants to hook without consequence. The part that wants to rot and ruin and laugh while doing it. Playing Pudge can be cathartic. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be relentless. He absorbs failure into his identity. Miss a hook? Try again. Die in lane. Stack Flesh Heap anyway. His gameplay rewards persistence over precision. In this way, he becomes the avatar of the flawed self, the one that keeps going despite, or maybe because of, its damage. He gives players permission to play badly, to be messy, to stop chasing aesthetic mastery, and instead embrace the crude joy of chaos. In psychological terms, Pudge evokes deep identification with what Carl Jung called the shadow, the hidden, repressed parts of the psyche that we deny in order to function in society. These are our cravings, our cruelty, our laziness, our addictions, parts we label as undesirable or shameful and push into the unconscious. But the shadow doesn't disappear, it festers, and in moments of release, through art, dreams, or games, it emerges. Pudge is one such emergence. He is the externalized shadow, visible, grotesque, and gleefully unapologetic. When a player chooses him, they are not just selecting a hero, they are stepping into a space where the shadow is allowed to breathe. And this act is not only therapeutic, it is thrilling. To hook someone from the fog and consume them is more than a kill. It is the acting out of an instinct we often suppress, to dominate, to shock, to feed without guilt.
Most games reward players for suppressing their inner chaos, precision, calculation, clean execution. These are the marks of competitive mastery, but Pudge flips that script. He rewards chaos. He rewards unpredictability. His skills are not surgical, they're feral. The hook is not just a tool, it's an eruption. And in that eruption, players experience a psychological release. It's a way of saying, I don't need to be in control to matter. I can miss and still matter. I can decay and still win. This turns gameplay into a kind of low-stakes emotional testing ground, where we experiment with failure, indulgence, and aggression in ways we can't in daily life. It's not about pretending to be monstrous. It's about letting the monstrous speak.
Pudge makes room for failure, for noise, for unpredictability, and in that room, players find relief. They don't have to pretend. They don't have to be beautiful. They can just be. For newer players, he's appealing because of the spectacle. For veterans, it's the intimacy, the familiarity of the loop, the weight of the hook, the rhythm of rot. He's a hero we return to, not in pursuit of rank, but in search of release. And somewhere in that release, we begin to recognize something deeper. We don't just love Pudge because he's strong or funny. We love him because he gives form to what we are afraid to say. That there's a part of us that doesn't want to be healed. It wants to indulge, to descend, to feel everything all at once, even if it hurts. We often speak of the shadow in metaphor, but Pudge forces it into flesh. This is what makes him such a potent image, not just a character we project onto, but one that pushes back. He doesn't simply carry our darkness, he parades it, and in doing so, he shows us something uncomfortable, that the shadow isn't just made of fear and shame, it's also made of freedom, of appetite, of the desire to act without censorship. Many of us go through life dragging our shadow behind us like a weight, but in playing Pudge, we momentarily reverse the direction, we let it lead, and what we find in that surrender isn't just chaos, it's clarity. The grotesque becomes articulate, the absurd becomes familiar, the hunger makes sense. This is not just immersion, it is psychological rehearsal, a place where we can test what it means to be whole by letting ourselves fall apart without real-world consequences. And perhaps that's the real addiction, not the win, not the MMR, but the rare feeling of being fully unguarded.
Redemption is a strange word in Pudge's world. There are no arcs of heroism, no moments of clarity or salvation. He does not seek to be cured, and perhaps that's what makes him unsettling. He does not apologize. In most stories, we're taught that transformation is the reward for pain, that if you suffer, you get to be saved. But Pudge denies us that. He does not transform. He continues. He kills. He laughs. He rots. And in doing so, he forces us to ask, What if healing isn't the point? This is not to say that growth is meaningless, but that not all suffering moves toward light. Some of it loops, some of it lingers, some of it becomes identity. For many who live with addiction, the notion of recovery is not a destination, is a daily rebalancing, a decision made again and again, and sometimes a decision failed again and again. From a psychological perspective, addiction isn't simply about substances or behaviors. It's about patterns that override intention. Dopamine hijacks reward circuits. Habits become rituals. Rituals become cages. In that sense, playing Pudge is not unlike addiction itself. The hook becomes the fix. The rot becomes the cycle. The wins don't matter as much as the performance of need, again and again. The player doesn't just play Pudge. They become complicit in his loop. And yet, there's something to be learned here, not a moral in the traditional sense, but a recognition that indulgence without awareness decays, that repetition without reflection traps us. If there is a morality to Pudge's design, it is this. He reveals what happens when hunger runs the show. When pain becomes power, and power becomes persona, we are not immune to this. We scroll, we binge, we chase, we numb, and then we queue up for another round. Pudge may be cartoonish, but the psychology is real. So where does that leave us? If we know we're caught in loops, why do we keep walking them? If we see the cost of indulgence, why does it still comfort us? And if we find ourselves in Pudge's image, bloated with hunger, laughing through the rot, then what truly are we healing for? Pudge is not beautiful in spite of his grotesqueness. He is beautiful because of it. He is not a glitch in the system. He is the system revealed. In him, we find the dark logic of indulgence laid bare, the loop that feeds itself, the hunger that creates its own mythology, the player who returns not to win, but to feel. His cleaver is not just a weapon, it is a mirror. His rot, not just decay, but confession. He shows us that the parts we disown, our compulsions, our cravings, our mess, can become not only visible, but playable, livable, maybe even lovable. That's the paradox. We revile him, and yet we pick him. We mock him, yet we quote him. We laugh, and we rot with him. Because deep down, we know Pudge isn't just a character. He is a permission slip, a warning sign, a prayer, a joke we tell to avoid the silence.
An altar to everything we consume when we think no one's watching.
To play Pudge is to act out our worst instincts in a space where we don't have to apologize for them. And that makes the experience honest, maybe too honest. Because if we allow ourselves to fall in love with the grotesque, if we let the loops define us, if we make altars of our addictions and sing their praises long enough, what part of us is left unclaimed? Or worse, what if there was never any part of us untouched to begin with?